Hey everyone, I'm Andrea Ferretti and this is Yogaland. Hi Jason.
Hi, Andrea.
How you doing?
I'm good.
Good.
People who are watching this can see why I'm good
Yeah.
because I have a really good dog in my
You
lap.
got a queen on your
I
lap
have a queen in my lap.
and she is so in a good state right now.
Those of you just listening to this audio, I really appreciate it. We thank you for being a listener. If you ever want to watch this, we also publish this on my YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And not only do you get to see our smiling faces, you get to see this gorgeous one.
You get to see the pointy ears of a
Yeah.
very attentive chihuahua.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to talk today about a perennial topic, I think for any person, but especially for yoga teachers, and that is finding your voice. But before we do that, I want to do a little housekeeping,
Sure.
which is that you are about to start your 300-hour training.
I am. Yeah, we're doing the hips and legs module. I'm super excited about it. If anyone's on the fence, let me shove you over with loving kindness.
Yeah.
It's so good. It's such a community. And something I've been thinking about a lot as a yoga teacher is how much as teachers we have to do alone. Like as a yoga teacher, it's a weirdly lonely, isolated business.
It is.
I mean, we have our students. Our students are our community for sure. We don't do that alone. But in terms of peers and having oversight and guidance from a mentor who has experience, it's actually really rare. It's something I had no idea. So for that alone, it's an amazing thing. So I would love to work with anyone who's interested. And that's it. Registration is happening. And our first live session is May 7th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have been thinking lately about how many live calls you do in general, like during the day for your different programs. And part of it is because you also do ongoing calls for
Yeah.
your graduates, which people may or may not know about. So you actually really mean it when you talk about building community. We recently hired Matthew Shaw to help us with everything. And it's been really sweet when I've been on certain calls for people to be like, oh my gosh, Matthew, I'm so glad to see you in this role. Like people really do feel connected to each other. And it's a really nice thing.
For sure.
This is the module where you talk about sequencing, isn't it?
I talk about sequencing in every module.
Throughout, right, of course.
But I would say that this is like the cornerstone of sequencing.
Yeah.
This is like the master sequencing template. And yeah, this is clutch.
All that good stuff. Okay. So if people want to find out all the details, the dates, you can go to jasonyoga.com/300.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's get started with our topic at hand.
Yeah.
So let's just back way out and define what we mean when we talk about finding your voice.
Yeah. There's a couple things that come to mind. Number one is finding your personality as a yoga teacher. Number two, it's figuring out your class, like your class architecture or your sequencing approach. I think the third to me is literally voice. When I think of voice, I think about like means by which you communicate. And so that's often going to be carried through your style of cueing and style of interaction with students. And then final voice to me is really just like a broader stand-in for your overall approach and ethos as a yoga teacher, right?
Okay.
And one of the things that we'll talk about is each one of those elements, whether it's your personality, whether it's your class structure, whether it's your sequencing, whether it's how you cue and how you interact with your students, they're all going to evolve.
Right.
They're all going to change, right? And so in a way, I mean, maybe we don't want to say this because it grammatically doesn't seem correct, but it's almost like finding your voices, right? It's kind of finding who you are as a yoga teacher at any given time, how to embrace that, and also to realize it's going to change and evolve as you do, right?
Yeah, I think the evolution piece is really important.
I do too.
Because I think in any profession, but I would think especially one, I mean, I know I felt it in writing, But with writing, you have more time behind the scenes to refine and go over it and have other people look at it and then decide not to publish it, or, you have a lot more leeway and space to experiment. Whereas when you're presenting in front of a group of people, you feel more pressure because you're presenting on the spot. And I know that when I started teaching many years ago, I didn't like the discomfort of not having my voice defined yet. So I didn't want to go through the
Absolutely.
trial and error.
But it's both,
Yeah.
right? It is. So finding your voice can sound like nice and sweet, but I would
Hmm.
say it's a pretty excruciating process.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it's like in relationships, to find like your best relationship, it's probably going to take you a while.
Hmm.
And I almost kind of think about this. I want to broaden the scope another way when we think about finding your voice because of what you just brought up about writing. You can kind of think about it as a yoga teacher as finding your style,
Hmm.
right? Finding your approach, right? So if I think about some of the authors that I really like, right? Like they have a style, they have a voice, they have a presence, they have a tone. And as a yoga teacher, we want to cultivate those. But like an artist, or if you think about like a musician, like that has a style, what does it do? It evolves over time. It changes over time. It has to, and we have to let it continue to iterate.
Hmm.
But I think there is a core at every phase of finding our voice. It comes from believing in and centering what you value most.
Hmm.
So for me, I have to kind of step back and say, okay, I have a personality, I have a class style, I have a sequencing style, I have a cueing manner, I have a kind of an overall way of interacting with students. But what is the core of that? The core of that is knowing what I want to teach and why I want to teach it,
Hmm.
right? It's feeling a sense of dharma. It's feeling a sense of, oh, I really want people to feel good when they take my class. I want them to feel welcome when they take my class. And I want them to learn something about how the body works and how the yoga tradition works, right? Like those are all things that I think of all of the time. Those are always at the center of who I am as a teacher. But the way that I'm going to communicate those things is going to evolve over time as I also change
Hmm.
over time.
Hmm. So, thinking about someone at the very beginning of this journey, would you say there's two kind of it's kind of a two-part question. One is, how much do you think it's natural and perhaps for a lot of people necessary to consciously or unconsciously adopt your teacher's voice in the beginning? And then I guess the second part of the question is, you mentioned values. Do you recommend kind of like journaling on your values to
I
get clear on
I
that?
don't journal on my values, but I recommend it. Like there's
Hmm.
plenty of things that I think are good ideas that I don't actually do,
Hmm.
right? So that's simple. I think whatever helps you clarify. You know what helps me? I feel like I've brought this up on the podcast, but what has always helped me clarify w- my values as a yoga teacher was being on an airplane, flying to another city, thinking to myself, I hate this. I'm terrified of turbulence. I don't want to be away from my family. Why am I doing this? And then I literally would get existential. I would get meta. Every Friday flight, I'd get meta. And I would then really figure out, like, okay, I'm going to be in Minneapolis for 3 days. Here's what I really care about. You know what I mean? Like, not to be too dramatic, although I guess I already was, but there are certain things in life that kind of help us cut through our BS
Hmm.
to figure out what really matters.
Right.
And for me, it was that,
Mm.
right? It really was. And so that was for me. But you also asked about being a new teacher.
Mhm.
So I just wrapped another session of my 200-hour training. And I am so proud of these new students, so proud. And also, it's a little premature for them to know their voice because they're still learning their instruments,
Mm.
right? And so I kind of lay it out like this. When you are learning to become a teacher, there are so many things for you to be developing that it's going to take time for you to find you in the teaching.
Right.
You need to know that that is a process. I need you to know that you're going to have to look for you, but it's okay for you not to find you yet,
Hmm.
right? It's kind of like if you were learning to play the piano and you were a novice at playing the piano, it might be a little early to write your own songs. You have to learn how at first to play someone else's.
Hmm.
And so that's exactly what you ask. And the response is, it's not only important, but it's the natural outcome of being a new teacher is you're going to parrot your teachers, right? You're going to have their pacing. You're going to have their turns of phrase. You're going to have all of these layers, just like a child is going to pick up mannerisms of their parents. But also what I want to lay out to them is, and you are going to evolve from that to find you, right?
Hmm.
So we all, when we're new students, when we're new teachers, my recommendation is set your sights on literally the finding part of your voice,
Hmm.
right? Like what are you learning about your personality in front of others? What are you learning about what's coming natural for you and feels right to you in your communication style? What teachers are you drawn to and why? What is their sequencing approach? So you can be at that level, you can be really studying why you're drawn to the teachers you're drawn to. Why are you drawn to the styles and the voices that you are? Because this is going to rub off on you and it's going to be your starting point.
Hmm.
So I think as a newer teacher, you want to be mindful of this transition, but you shouldn't feel like, oh, this is my first year of teaching. I need to be like a fully distinct, complete self-assembled style. It's
Hmm.
not going to happen,
Right.
right?
So what happens? Like it just over time evolves naturally, or do you remember a point where you were like, "Huh,
I
I'm sounding a bit like Rodney. It might be time for me to think about, I don't know."
Yeah, I think it could be helpful to kind of like chart some specific times, right? Like tell everyone a little bit about my journey of kind of clarifying my voice and who I am
Sure.
now.
Yeah.
But part of the answer goes to how I was educated, right? I remember Rodney telling us, and for people that don't know Rodney Yee, and for people that don't know Rodney Yee in the 1990s, Rodney Yee was one of the most globally well-known yoga teacher. He was certainly the most well-known Western yoga teacher in the world by a mile,
It was on
like
Oprah.
by a mile,
Yeah.
right? And Rodney was steadfast and stubborn and regularly communicated to all of us that the world did not need another one of him, that we didn't want us to be a carbon copy,
Yeah.
right? And I feel like all of my core seminal teachers had strong personalities. They were distinct voices and styles. And they also made it very clear to us that they wanted us to figure out who we were, so that they were providing us with the tools for self inquiry and the tools for teaching so that we could evolve those tools on our own. So the bottom line is, I never worked with a teacher who tried or required me to stay within a certain image,
Yes. Or
right?
language
Or
or,
language
yeah.
or any of these
That was
things,
really
right?
big when we were coming up in the Anusara community. They all use the same words, language,
Opposite of
descriptions.
that.
Yeah.
Opposite of that. And and that worked really well with my personality, right? And so for me, that starting point was part of being a yoga student. A big part of being a yoga student is self-study, it's svadhyaya, it's knowing yourself better. And a big part of being a teacher is also swadhyaya. It's self-study. It's knowing yourself better. And so I was from the very beginning, it was kind of a mandate from my teachers that I didn't just follow a script. I think, interestingly enough, the next big shift for me in finding my voice, and again, I would say that is everything from becoming clear with letting my personality shine, figuring out my sequencing approach, my class architecture, my communication style. I think the next big thing was actually still related to Rodney, which was several years after I was a consistent student of his and several years after we finished our 2-year training. He moved. He moved. And this was long before Zoom. This was long before like any mechanism of
Yeah, he moved across the
ongoingness.
country.
Yeah, he moved to New York.
Yeah.
Right. And so I at most would see him when we both taught at a conference. So in a way, that was kind of like I went to college. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I separated from my parents. And in that experience, like he he was so formative for me as a teacher, both when he was teaching me, but also when I was required to be more on my own. And the reality is I just didn't resonate with enough other teachers to become an underling with someone else.
Right.
I've learned a ton from other people, but I didn't absorb things from other people like I absorbed from him, right? And so a big part of my evolution was not having him around when I was teaching. I would say the next huge thing, probably one of the biggest like voice shifts is in my teaching journey, was starting to train Brazilian Jiu Jitsu 8 years ago, a
Hmm.
lot. And a big part of that was I had no idea up till that point how weak I had gotten in certain parts of my body. I had no idea that my posterior chain was as weak as it was. I had no idea that I had cultivated certain aspects of my embodiment really well, and then other parts had gotten bad,
Hmm.
right? And so in a way, training jujitsu, it helped me see my experience of my body from a very different lens. I had trained it to be semi adept at an asana practice. But when I started to doing more dynamic and interactive work, I started to see big holes and
Mm-hmm.
big gaps, and I wanted to patch them, right? And so at that phase, I just started to focus a lot more on functional strength. I started to focus a lot more on end range strength. I started to focus a lot more on developing concentric strength. I started to realize, like, oh, not only is it my body, but everyone's approach to sequencing, at least to some regard, is based on their own preferences. So when I started to kind of revise how I worked with my body, I started to revise my sequencing. I started to focus a lot more on back body strength. I started to focus a lot more on techniques and cueing, where I was helping people build more strength in their flexibility instead of just flexibility, right? So my values shifted, my priorities shifted, my voice shifted, and my sequencing shifted,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I was just kind of pick out one more thing. I became, I was saying this the other day. I actually did a post actually today. Of all of the elements of being a yoga teacher that came hardest for me was anatomy. Anatomy was so hard. I had 200 hours of just anatomy training and I knew nothing afterwards. Like I just didn't
You didn't
process
retain
it.
it?
I didn't.
Hmm.
I didn't process it because of the way it was taught. It wasn't taught bad, but it wasn't taught in a way that I could mm, feel it and repeat it and digest it and know it.
Hmm.
It was much more memorization based, right? And so I got really frustrated and I met an orthopedic surgeon and we both kind of respected each other and we kind of like bounced ideas off of each other. And I'm like, I'm going to learn more about anatomy through my relationship with this person. And we built a course together. We built an anatomy program together, right? And so that was another thing that kind of shifted my, not so much my personality, but my focal points and my style and my approach. And so the through line through all of these things, I found my voice through following my interests,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, I think it seems to me from the story, it in the beginning, it was much more based on your training and those voices in your training. And then once you felt more grounded in who you were and more established and more comfortable, you were able to then follow some passions down some rabbit holes and kind of shape your teaching around those things. And I see that I witness that with you even now, that you get really inspired by something or excited about something, and then you kind of examine it from all different angles and start to incorporate it and maybe make a course about it, or and I think to the more experienced teachers out there who are listening, I think that's a way to keep going as a
For
teacher.
sure.
That's a way to keep your voice going and not getting bored. Is to follow your passions.
I think you have to follow your passions.
Yeah, I think you and I are just very much geared that way.
You think?
I think lifelong learning, it's definitely one of my core values. It's like something I'm really trying to pass on to Sophia. And so I think we find that ability to grow and learn and keep growing and learning to be really motivating and interesting and inspiring. I don't know if everybody in all jobs feels that way, if that's their.
I don't think everyone in all jobs, but I feel like there's something about this job.
Mm,
And so this like find your voice topic or just sentiment. One of the things you and I have been joking with you about in the last year is like finally realizing I'm an artist,
yeah.
right? The reality is I actually think that the vast majority of yoga teachers are creatives, right? And I think that because we're doing a creative job in which, again, it's not all about us, but the way that we are interpreting yoga, the yoga tradition, and the way we are communicating it is inherently creative. Like everyone does it even just a little bit differently.
Hmm.
And so to me, I feel like of any vocation that someone can have, because this is a creative one, you have to continue to learn. You have to continue to grow. You have to continue to have, or another way of thinking about it simply is like continuing to have life experiences and allowing those life experiences to come through you as a teacher,
Mm.
right? Because part of, obviously, we're teaching yoga, but we're also interacting with the human condition.
Hmm.
Like as a yoga teacher, yes, you have a subject and you're teaching that subject. That subject is yoga, but you're teaching it to humans and you're teaching it to humans in a group dynamic. And what that means is you're really like you're interacting with the human condition. And so every life experience that you have is going to give you some insights into how to work with people
Hmm.
and to
Hmm.
do it in a clearer, more genuine and sincere way,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to say something else too,
Okay.
because you brought up like our personality. I think part of the reason that this topic appeals to me is speaking for me and speaking as your husband. You and I have no choice but to be us,
Yeah.
right?
It's true.
Like we have strong personalities, we have specific personalities, and neither of us are good at masking, right? Would you say that?
Yeah.
Right?
Hmm.
And we kind of both wear our hearts on our sleeves,
Hmm.
right? And so I feel like because I am so me and I can only be me, I better let that part be the part that teaches yoga and ask other people to do the same
Mm.
and to trust it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I just want to
Yeah, that's
drop that
interesting.
little bit in.
That's interesting.
Like if I had to, because you know how difficult, let's say we were just talking about like a very random thing, like an Instagram post, right? I'm not gonna be like, yeah, it's awesome. Right. Like you're going to know how I feel about 99% of the things that I interact with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I can't fake it.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't fake being a yoga teacher.
Right.
Right. It's too deep. It's too personal. It's too specific. And here's the thing, not everybody loves my voice, but because I have found and continue to find my voice, um, I I feel I feel confident in the sincerity of what I'm presenting.
Mm-hmm. I think that this is really interesting because I think that you're saying that in part because of your inherent personality and inability to mask and necessarily like fit into a box, that leads you to being able to, well, it requires you to use your authentic voice.
Yes.
I would say for me in teaching yoga, I had sort of the opposite issue with my own inability to mask. Well, I guess I would say the issue that I had was I got caught up more in people pleasing. And I would say that's one of the obstacles that
Yeah,
we've
that
kind of
yeah, yeah,
talked
yeah. Yeah.
about, the obstacles to finding your
So
voice.
so keep going, but like so now okay, so now let's just kind of like throw a little subhead to the world to
Mhm.
organize. Let's say now we're kind of talking about what are some of the obstacles
Yeah.
to finding your voice.
Yeah. So that would be for me. I didn't, I don't think I even had begun to unpack my people pleasing nature until I was faced with being in front of a room of 30 people. You know, I can remember going to sub actually at the Bay Club, and it was literally like the worst experience of my life because all I wanted was to give these people the class that they expected.
Mm.
And I wasn't David Lurie. And I didn't even actually go to David's class that
I
often.
love David Lurie, but I would have never married him.
Neither would I.
Well, my point is, I don't want you to be David Lurie. I'm
Oh,
glad you
I
weren't
was
David
like,
Lurie.
I was
Sorry.
totally lost.
David might be listening.
That's
He's still
cute. I
listening.
had this
Yeah,
like little
yeah,
like
yeah.
disconnect for a
Yeah.
moment. Um, so anyway, it wasn't until I was in that situation that I realized how important people pleasing was to me.
Mm.
And it ultimately was sort of too much of an obstacle for me. Like I couldn't get over that constant questioning of like, how was class for people and how did they feel about it? And I have no idea. And I'm supposed to just keep doing this and doing this and doing this and doing this and getting no feedback whatsoever, except maybe 1 week, 10 people came and the next week, 2 people came and the next week, 30 people came and the next week, 2 people. What is happening?
Yeah.
It was really, yeah.
So, okay. So I'm going to stay with this. So people pleasing or the desire to please everyone is absolutely an impediment to finding your voice. But there's like this huge glaring error in the entire concept. And the glaring error is the idea that there somehow is a magical voice that does please everybody,
Mm-hmm.
right? I want to please everybody. I want to be the only yoga teacher on the planet. And I want everyone to love me all the time. I want those things. Okay. But the reality is, I know that there's no voice that everyone wants to hear. I know that. So to me, I actually am a people pleaser in a way. I do, like I said, like I really want everyone to love class. I genuinely do. And yes, on the inside, my feelings are hurt sometimes. At the same time, I know that there's no voice for everyone.
Right.
Right. Do you know what I mean?
That makes sense.
So I know that there's no mask I can wear that somehow is going to tick every box for everybody. And so to me, the logical fallacy of this is significant enough to say, F it. If if most people are going to like most of my classes and some people are going to not like my class, I would say this. I would say that most people like most classes that they go to, and that some people don't like some of the classes they go to. And there's nothing that a teacher can do to make any class perfect for everyone. There just isn't. I have enough experience in knowing that. That I just know there's not a decent alternative,
Mhm.
right? And so I think that's another way of saying one of the, it's another one of the obstacles is an obstacle to finding your voice is feeling like you need to please everybody,
Mhm.
right? And the reality is it can't be done. And one of the things I look to, Andrea, is like, you look at like, I'll just throw some random things out there, okay? If the greatest quarterback in NFL today has a bad day, there's going to be 100,000 people on Twitter that say that that person's terrible. You look at the greatest musicians of all time, and there's people that just hate their music. As we've talked about
I don't
extensively,
want you need to say this in public.
what?
You're going to say that you
No,
hate.
I'm not going to say anything.
Okay.
I'm going to say
I thought you were going to say which
no,
band you hated that everybody else
no, no, no,
likes.
no, no,
Okay.
no. No. There's a lot of pop music I don't like. So what I'm getting to is like, as a yoga teacher, sometimes we think people like us. This is the really key point I want to land on. As a yoga teacher, you probably thought that people liked your class because you did a good job, or didn't like your class because you didn't do a good job.
Mm-hmm.
That isn't true.
Mm.
Some people like your class because they preferred your approach. Some people didn't like your class because they did not prefer your approach. And so to me, as a yoga teacher, the essence of everything is finding your voice and honing it so you know that your approach is done as well as you can do it,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
Because then the people that are going to prefer it are going to prefer it. And the people that don't prefer it, they don't prefer it just because they're not into it.
Right. They can move on and
Yeah,
find
they're not
the
into
style
it.
that they prefer.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And I think literally it's like the more as yoga teachers, we kind of realize that a lot of the preferences that students have are just their own, they're just their own preferences. They're just their own whims. And it's what they like or don't, it's what they prefer or don't prefer on any given day. And I think that the more you really know that you are actually you, and you're being like the best version of that, the more you can surrender the rest.
When we're talking about and we're thinking about finding and cultivating our voice now as a new teacher and into the future, the first thing to think about is staying curious and following your passions.
Yeah, because you're going to change,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're going to change. Literally, even if I just taught a set sequence structure like Ashtanga yoga or something else, I guarantee if I did that for 30 years, even within that structure, I would change. My tone would change, my personality would change. There'd be little components of myself that would evolve because I would change, I
Mm-hmm.
would grow, I would evolve. And so I think to not think about yourself as a teacher, as this fixed entity where like you got to get to this place, and then once you're at this place, then people will love you and you will know who you are. Being a yoga teacher is like, it's like being a human. It's you're going to continue to change and evolve. And so I think you have to factor that in. I'm going to kind of quickly say one more thing because I keep thinking, because you brought it up about Rodney. I remember um, assisting him on a retreat in Mexico. And I had been studying with him a lot for almost 4 years, like a lot. And I assisted him on a retreat in Mexico. And all week he taught completely different things. And to me, I was like, oh, because I admired him as a teacher, I kind of thought he was like an entity.
Like fixed.
Yes.
Huh.
I thought he's like, oh, he's this, right? Or like if you listen to like a band, like they're just like their music in one way, like U2 Joshua Tree, and then they come out with Octung. You're like, whoa,
Huh.
that's different.
So
And
what did that mean to
that
you?
opened me up.
Oh, that's good.
That meant everything to me. He didn't do it for me.
I know
So,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
But my point is like, if we have this as a role model, then we don't have to fear either an urgency of like, now I have to have all of these parts of my teaching style new and different and unique. And it also opens us to changing and evolving, like to continue to grow. And when I saw that within someone that I admired, it helped me just be where I was,
Mhm.
be me, and continue to evolve it.
I would say another point that okay. So I did my teacher training. I did my 200-hour, and I did it during a time of my life where I was between jobs, between publishing jobs. And toward the end of that training, I decided I wanted to teach part-time, but then I got like my dream job at Yoga Journal. And so it was too much to keep up everything, and I stopped teaching. Had I not gotten that job, I think the next step for me would have been to get more training
Yeah.
to be able to do it. I graduated from my 200-hour, I started teaching, and it was like being thrown into the deep end of the pool with ne'er a floaty in sight or a technique in sight. I just realized how much more methodical training I needed.
Yes.
I had been introduced to like the depth of yoga, but I didn't have the skills.
A 200-hour, and I'm not throwing 200-hour trainings under the bus. I teach them.
I
honor
loved
them.
it. It was one of the best experiences of my life.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Okay. It's also the equivalent of one semester at college taking 15 credit units.
Yeah.
Almost no one would think, I mean, that's 1/4 of an associate's degree.
Mm-hmm.
That typically isn't going to be enough total education, a deep enough well to feel whole or to feel complete or to feel like you have the knowledge and the skills to continue to grow over time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think without a doubt, whether it's a 300-hour training, whether it's ongoing education, whatever it is, as a yoga teacher, you have a lot of technical demands on you in terms of understanding your job. And also, like I said earlier, you're working with the human condition. So there's just so many nuances. There's so many things that go into being a teacher, and even more so being like the you version of a teacher, that you need a deep and ongoing skill set.
There's one more thing I want to add that we haven't talked about, and that is simply to just practice as much as you can. It sounds
Yeah.
so basic, but when I think about writing, the reason I'm putting it out there is because in the context of finding your voice in writing, you just have to do it.
Yes.
And people just get in their own way with writing all the time. Like, I can't do it, or I don't like it's not making sense. No, you actually just have to keep doing it.
Yes.
I kind of, one of the reasons I have not taught a writing course, I used to get asked all the time in your trainings, is because like I could sit on a stage and tell you in 5 minutes how to become a better writer. And that is to simply do it. Just keep doing it and doing it and doing it. And that's not to say there isn't skill and there aren't techniques. There are plenty, but at the crux of it is you have to actually do it.
I keep referring to my trainings. I just graduated a 200-hour group, like I said earlier. This is what I've told them. My job was to give them the skills and the experience and the inspiration. And they've done a crazy amount of peer teaching, like from day one. to give them all of the foundational skills and to give them all of the like structure and care and knowledge and support to start teaching, to start to become a good teacher. Meaning like all of everything that that foundational training could possibly do is just give you the floor to stand on. But what is going to evolve you into being a more refined teacher that has a sense of self and that has a more defined voice is only going to come through time on the job.
Right.
It's only going to come through time on the job. And that circles back to a need to have empathy and a need to kind of perceive yourself as your day one voice is not going to be your year two voice, is not going to be your year five voice. And if you feel like you've been stuck in a voice that you've outgrown, then that's where more education comes in,
Mm-hmm.
right? I work with a lot of people in my advanced training who just realize they've come to the extent of what their foundational skills, knowledge, and experience can provide them, right? And so and this is regardless of profession, right? If you think about any profession, in the vast majority of professions, there's a certain amount of specialization that you're going to need if you want to improve your skill set,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I think kind of the final thing that I want to mention is one of the reasons, sometimes we have a voice, sometimes we've found it, and also it's burned out,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like sometimes, hey, we found our voice, but we're burned out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a big part of managing burnout as a yoga teacher comes down to two things that are both related. Number one is teaching in other environments, meaning you might be burned out because you're teaching way too many public classes. And so you need to also start to teach some privates. You need to start to teach some workshops. You need to teach a series. We need to get you teaching a retreat. And in doing so, we need to have you pare back some of the volume of just those drop-ins. Because as a yoga teacher, the voice that you use, or kind of the skill set and the voice you use, is going to vary slightly based on environment. And so you're going to, by teaching in other environments, you're going to be different. You're going to be stimulated your intellectual stimulation is going to be different. And I think the final thing is thinking about the drop-in public classes that you are teaching as maintaining a greater through line over time. One of the things I just at every step for a seasoned teacher want them to stop doing is only thinking about one class at a time.
Mm-hmm.
As a yoga teacher, you are going to burn out if you only think about one class at a time, because one class at a time isn't as intellectually stimulating. And also, if you're going to learn anything as a student, you need, just like as a yoga teacher to find your voice, you need time, you need repetition. As a student, if you want to make progress, you need time and you need repetition. And so as a teacher, if you can think about teaching your drop-in classes as more of a curriculum style, then your students are going to make more progress. And when your students make more progress, you feel much more, I hate to say it as a teacher, but you feel a little bit more rewarded.
Mm-hmm.
Like just like a student gets really excited when they make progress, teachers get really excited when students make progress.
Mm-hmm.
And that helps to minimize some of that burnout.
Yeah. I think that's great. I think that's a great ending place because that is a big, important takeaway.
Yeah.
And it's just a beautiful coincidental segue that it is actually part of your teacher training that you're about to offer.
It's like one of the first things that I tell people on day one of my 300-hour training is I want to help you never think about just one class at a time.
Mm,
Literally never.
yeah.
It is the most ineffective and exhausting way to be a yoga teacher. And most yoga teachers are stuck in those patterns. And that doesn't mean that we don't still teach and think about individual classes,
Hmm.
but you don't want to think about each individual class as like a one-off in a vacuum experience.
Right.
Because just think about yourself as a student of any subject matter. You're not going to get it in one-off random classes.
Yep.
You are going to turn, you are going to churn, you are not going to stay. And it's the same thing with the student base. And so as a teacher, if we can think a little bit more about ourselves as teaching a kind of a more complete curriculum, it offloads so much stress.
Yeah. Gives more continuity, more
Yeah.
progress, all those things. All right. Okay. Well, thanks, Jason.
You're welcome.
And thank you, everyone, for listening. If you are up for checking out the training, go to jasonyoga.com/300. And we just always appreciate when you share the podcast on social media. If it resonates with you, share it with someone who you think might get some use out of it. We love all the things. We love the ratings, the reviews, the comments. We just appreciate you hanging out with us after all these years. And until next week, enjoy your practice.